collector diary. It's about time I started filming a new collector diary, because it's been a little while. We do like to do one about once a month. So again, it's going to be the episodic thing of whatever I've been picking up as we go along. So let's have a look. We got some new books here, just published. And where are we now? We're the 22nd of September. You probably won't see this for a while because it'll be bits and pieces coming in slowly. Here is My Death by Lisa Tuttle in New York Review of Books Classics. And what an honour for Lisa to get into MYRB Classics, the finest reissue imprint in the world after Penguin Modern Classics. But having said that, MYRB are a bit more independent and they do all sorts of things. There's some great SF actually. And this is probably a horror novel and I've not read it. It was initially issued, I think, by PS. So it's really nice to see something that was a small press book. It's a different small press in the USA, getting into such a prestigious imprint. And that's good news because Lisa's really good. And I think she's just turned 70. I've never met her. Apparently she's really nice. She's been married to Christopher Priest, of course. And I've been reading her stuff since the 80s. And that's great to see that. And isn't that fantastic? This is about a writer who's recently widowed, who feels somewhat adrift, and she gets involved in writing a biography. And there's a certain something about that reminded me of the neon scene, as it were, of Christopher Priest's The Quiet Woman. So I'm going to be interested to read this and compare the two, and maybe I'll co-review them. And yeah, fantastic. So isn't that beautiful? Classy stuff. At some point I will do a video about MYRB SF fantasy and horror, because they do some cracking stuff. Then another female writer I've been revisiting of late, as you will have seen, is James Tiptree Jr. And I thought, well, I don't have Her Smoke Grows Up Forever in Masterworks, and I don't really like Masterworks when they're this chunky, if I'm honest. But this is a mammoth collection of short stories, huge amount of stuff in here, and I do find her hit and miss, but you know, hit more than miss. There's lots of things in here I've got, like The Girl Who Was Plugged In, The Screwfly Solution, and The Women Men Don't See, Houston, Houston, Do You Read? But I just thought I should have this, and you know, and it's a great title, Her Smoke Rose Up Forever. Isn't that really evocative? Wonderful stuff. So there's a Masterworks. I don't buy many of the Masterworks because mostly they're things I've had for a billion years, you know. So then something I've wanted to buy for ages and can never get a decent copy. So you're going to see an unwrapping. This is William Morris, News from Nowhere, in a facsimile edition to resemble the original Kelmscott Press one, which Morris ran off himself on his own press at Kelmscott. And this is published by Victoria and Albert Museum, V&A, in association with Thames and Hudson, and it's shrink wrapped. And this has been around for a few years now, but whenever we have it into work, it doesn't always come shrink wrapped, and it's a real shame because it's usually in the state, and I wanted a pristine one. So I'm going to clip it out of the shrink now. So I'll get the trusty mini orange snipper, the old scissor, and I'll just gingerly pop a little hole there. And this is a book I've read a long time ago. I've got a Penguin, I've got a Penguin classic of it, which I've had for like zillions of years. And I went through a big William Morris phase in the 90s. I got very interested in him and the arts and crafts movement. And Morris, of course, was a utopian socialist, and this is a utopian SF novel. And he wrote lots of fantasy novels as well, you know, the Well at the End of the World, and he was very influenced by the Icelandic sagas. Isn't that absolutely gorgeous? Look at that. Beautiful. It's got the twin dolphins there, which is the colophon of Thames and Hudson, fundamentally an art publisher. Lovely. Look at that. And it's got plain boards underneath, which we can live with, but it's got this stunning jacket. And Morris, of course, you know, he was probably the greatest designer who ever lived. You know, he was a socialist, but of course he had some money, and you know, he had his own cottage industry and his own view that the mechanized world, which, you know, he and before him William Blake sort of ranted and railed against, was the wrong way to go for society. But of course, you know, it's all very well and good when you've got sort of a moneyed sort of background and you can afford to have cottage industries. But I'll just show you the inside, which looks like an illuminated manuscript. And, you know, he was a master craftsman of all sorts of crafts. He's a good guy. And I read the monumental biography of him by Fiona McCarthy, which is a bigger book than this. It's huge. It's the last word. After reading it, I'd had so much Morris, I sort of stepped away from it a bit, but that's lovely. And I might do something about this on the channel soon, because I've got interested again in utopian novels. You'll have seen the Mac Reynolds video. So this is a sort of additionary to the final library I've always wanted to do. Very beautiful book, and I will revisit it a little to talk about that, because he's an important sort of precursor of Wells in lots of ways as well, but we'll come on to that. I wonder what we'll have next. Okay, next segment. It's a while later. I'm still absolutely wrecked. The house has been turned upside down. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Things are getting back to normal here in the Outlaw Booksellers Dumesnay. So what have we acquired of late? Well, let's have a look. God, I was awful in that previous segment. I probably not much better in this, but it is what it is. Anyway, it's The Ravages of Age and Too Much Time Spent Reading SF. So what have I got recently? Well, popping through the post yesterday, and I got this on eBay for a very princely sum, is this very lovely Lee Brackett paperback. This is an 80s or 90s Tory issue of the 50s classic The Big Jump by Lee Brackett. Very, very nice. Been after one of those for a while. And it's in really good condition. There's a couple of large stickers on the back, so we'll have to see about that. But they're proving quite resistant so far, but we'll have to sort of turn a hand to it. But yeah, sort of unbroken spine, minimal wear, really nice. Space opera city is the thing. Also on that front, something I acquired a while ago, and it hasn't popped up in the Collector Diary, and these are so hard to get in the UK. It's one of the Delray Ballantyne sort of best ofs from the 1970s and 80s, and this is the best of Lee Brackett. This was a princely £18 on ABE, which, you know, is a lot more than one likes to pay for a paperback, but it's in pretty good nick. And it's got some classic stuff in there because, you know, like a Burke, what did I do 20 years ago? I got rid of my copy of Sea Kings of Mars in Fantasy Masterworks. What a fail. One of the definitive planetary romance sort of series, really, set on Brackett sort of Mars. Marvellous, marvellous stuff. And it's really hen's teeth. It was when I was having to clear it, and I thought, I won't read that again. But of course, you know, you get back into your golden age, especially Brackett and Moore, the two queens, the empresses of that period. And it's just deathless stuff. So I'm looking forward to reading these. And there might be some that I haven't read, because there's some Venus ones, and I don't think I've read those. So great, great stuff. So we need a Brackett reissue program, please. Golags, maybe? Can somebody get on the program? I think they might be able to copy right now. I know there's editions which are print on demand, and I'm not so keen on that sort of thing. I know Matt Defoe's got some. They're not too bad in hardcover, so maybe we'll go that way. Very, very nice. Also blasting from the past, new out, just come out in the last few days, so I've been waiting for, is this masterwork of the best of Roger Zelazny. Now, I tend not to like the chunky masterworks, but this really is a fantastic collection. It contains the entire novel Damnation Alley, which has been out of print in the UK for years. And Golags has shown a certain amount of fealty to Zelazny recently. We've seen reissues in 2 volumes of the Amber books. There's an edition of Road Marks, which came out earlier this year. And they keep Lord of Light in print. Not one of my favourites, personally, Lord of Light, even though it is a popular one. But there's great stuff in here. Mostly short stories, of course. And, you know, a lot of the classic ones are in here. You've got things like A Rose for Ecclesiastes. Wonderful stuff. For a Breath I Tarry, He Who Shapes, who later became the Dream Master, I think it was. Home is the Hangman. Permafrost, The Doors of His Face, The Lamps of His Mouth, which is the Moby Dick type one. And it's got an introduction by Lisa Tuttle, I mentioned in the first part of this video. So great stuff. You can't go wrong with that, really. Really recommend that. So if you're new to Zelazny, pick it up and read the short. The short early stuff is the best stuff. After you get past about the mid-70s, he really goes off the ball quite a lot, in my opinion. So we're pleased to get that. The next thing, I need to apply the scissor. So let's just get the scissor out, because it's in a shrink wrap. And funnily enough, a few weeks ago, I was in a coffee shop in Bath, and it was a branch of Coffee Number One, and they have books in there, second-hand books. Not for sale, they're just there for you to leaf through. And there's the Penguin Treasury of Classics from about 1997. Beautiful book, lots of lovely illustrations, lots of excerpts from classic poetry and novels and what have you. And in there was a poem called Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe, which I knew and read for years, and great stuff. And my sort of Poe, complete Poe, I've had since the early 80s. I first read Poe in the mid 70s in a tiny little A format paperback, which I can't even remember the cover of. I can't remember what publisher it was. It's such a long time ago. And I've long wanted to upgrade, and this is the Barnes & Noble leather complete tales and poems, and we've sort of had this in stock where I work on and off for years. We haven't had it for ages, so I thought next time it comes in I'm going to pick it up because it's only intermittently available, and I'm going to just slice the shrink wrap off that now and talk about Poe a little, because he was one of my first loves, and I have read everything. A lot of the famous stories and my favourites I've read numerous times, 6, 10 times or more, and I go back to them every now and again. And Poe, of course, is the person who influenced the decadence in France, and I talked about that recently in my C.L. Moore videos. And really, he's fundamentally important, the master. I know Thomas M. Dish regarded him as a bit embarrassing because he was a tad purple, but let's take the shrink off, and I think you'll agree. Smells beautiful, leather embossed, nice picture there of the raven Nevermore, and silver gilt edges, decorated end papers, absolutely gorgeous. You can't really go wrong with that. So that is my new go-to Poe, and the paper's really nice as well. So there we are. You need AEAP in your life, the master. Nobody has ever done more in terms of the sublime short story as EAP. Think about it. He invented, the horror story as we know it. I mean, it was around, but he really codified it and sort of brought the Gothic and the decadent together. He brought the poetry into it in a way that nobody else had done before. He invented the detective story, and he pioneered SF as well. What a man. So there you go. Speaking of horror and that side of things, something which I acquired free, which I'm going to pass on to a friend on the channel, is this, A Haunting on the Hill by Elizabeth Hand, and this was a freebie I got, and this is a sequel to The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And I've read the introduction, which is really good, and beautiful book. And I think this is going to do quite well this autumn because Jackson is culty. Haunting of Hill House had a recent remake. Was it Netflix or Amazon, something like that, which was terrible. I'd rather the original film. I'm not a massive fan of Jackson's work, I'll be quite honest. I do quite like the novel that comes before this as well, but Elizabeth Hand is a safe pair of hands, and as I say, her introduction is very good, and I'm going to pass this on to a friend. So that's out there in the shops now, is $16.99, and it comes from, I can't even read the colophon. Let's see who's it from. It's from Sphere in hardback. Doesn't look anything like a Sphere book to me. So yeah, rather beautiful, I think you'll agree. This is supposedly a queer take and a sequel, so there's a certain amount of identity politics in there I could do without, but I'm going to be passing it on to somebody who I know will enjoy it. And great stuff, beautiful, I think you'd agree. More importantly to me, and this has just come out as well, I think publication date, theoretically it was the 20th, it's been a bit late getting into the shops, from Titan Books, is this, Stories Inspired by J.G. Ballard. Reports from the Deep End, edited by Rick McGrath of Terminal Press and the very wonderful Maxim Jakubowski. And this originally started life as the best of Deep Ends. Then Serious Publishers got involved, and it became something else. So all original stories by people who profess to be fans of Ballard, who were influenced by him. And you see it's got Will Self, Ian Sinclair, Christopher Fowler, sadly no longer with us. Lovely guy. What a shame he's gone. My mate Chris Beckett, and my old chum Michael Moorcock. So, and lots of others. And I'll be attending the signing come launch of this in London in mid-November. So if you're there and you watch Outlaw Bookseller, say hello, because I'm going to be filming it for a little feature on the channel. And then I go into the pub with the Ballardians, and there's all sorts of things in here. So I'll tell you who else is in it. Jeff Noon, Adam Roberts, Toby Lick. Toby once wrote an introduction to a book I wrote, and we've never actually met. So I finally get to meet him 15 years later. Rick McGrath himself, lots of other people I don't know, quite a few crime writers actually, which is interesting because of course Maxim has done lots of work with crime writing as well as SF over the years. Ramsey Campbell, a Barry N. Malzberg story, oh yes. Who else can we see? Rhys Hughes, who's a Welsh SF writer. Adrian Cole, that's an interesting inclusion. Pat Cadigan and Adam Roberts. you know, Jeff Nicholson, there's some Lavi Tidhar, some really great stuff in this. So I'm going to try and get this up there. A lot of the authors, not all of them, are going to be signing, and that's at Forbidden Planet, Cambridge, just off Cambridge Circus in central London if you want to go, and if you're there, I'll see you there. So that's this part of the Collector Diary done, I think, for now. I suppose I better do some work around the house. Another day, another collectible or three, and it's one of my days off, and the postman's just popped something through the door, so I thought I'd have a look at there's several things on the way, but I just thought I'd do them as they come in. So got home from work last night. This is something I got from Abe. Took a little while to come. It's not an uncommon book. You see it around. Always wanted one in reasonably decent nick, and this is Roger Zelazny, To Die in Italibar, in Faber UK hardcover first. You do see this around. This is probably the most common Faber Zelazny, and this was about 10-12 quid, and not a difficult one to get. I'm not sure about this chap on the cover, but I do like the livery. I do love Faber. I don't have enough Faber SF. I mean, I do and I don't. I've got lots of Kilworth, Holdstock, Priest, of course. I don't have any of the James Blish ones. I've got some of the Zelaznys. I could probably do with a little bit more. And the only thing Faber do SF wise now that they admit as SF is Solaris, and yet they will not reissue it in hardcover. What is wrong with them? Time for a letter and email, I think, because Solaris sells like mad, you know, and it's the only one they've got the rights to. And why don't they do a nice hardcover? Because lots of us would love a hardcover Solaris, wouldn't we? So there we are. So this is Zelazny from 75. I can't say I know a lot about this one, never got around to reading it. And as you have noticed, I am picking up and filling my Zelazny gaps at the moment. We'll do something about him on the channel for too long. So there's that. Then this morning, just got back from the dentist. We won't say any more about that. The postie brought me this. Here Comes Civilization, the complete science fiction of William Tenn, Volume 2, from Nesfa Press, New England Science Fiction Association, who do absolutely wonderful hardcover collections and some trade paperbacks. Mostly of people who are sort of neglected. William Tenn, also known as Philip Klass. Now, of course, there was another Philip Klass in the 50s. This is sort of 50s, 60s stuff, who was a UFO debunker, but not the same person, interestingly enough. And so you love that cover. Isn't that fantastic? And these are really great. You know, I do love Nesfa, and I've got a few more on the way. And I bought this because I feel he's somebody I've neglected. I've read of Men and Monsters, his novel, which is in here, and it's a Gollancz masterwork. And then there's a lot of sort of shorts. There's basically 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't think there's 4 or 5 sections, and they've got headings. I don't think they're titles of short story collections. But Tenn, you know, he is somebody who is neglected. And the reason why I bought this was because at the moment, I'm making my way through this Asimov Presents Great SF Story 16, 1954, which I bought from Morris Zardos. You will have seen that in part 2 of my recent big book haul. And yes, that's the cover artwork from Promised Land by Brian Stableford, one of the Hooded Swan books. And I've been reading through this, and it's got some great stuff in it. And the reason I decided to plump for that 10, which I'd been thinking about for a while, because the cover is just great. Let me just show you that again. Isn't that absolutely stunning? I love that purple alien being, whatever it is. It's whopping, isn't it? And I read a William Tenn story in here, which I hadn't read before, which is entitled Down Among the Dead Men. And it's really, really good. And the crisp tone and its delivery reminded me, and also the subject matter reminded me of The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, you know, a classic sort of military SF novel from the 70s, which you know and love. And if you don't, get out there and read it. Probably the best pure SF novel of the 70s. You know, if you wanted to give somebody a science fiction novel and they'd only ever watched science fiction films by the likes of James Cameron, you'd give them The Forever War. And it still hasn't been filmed, which is baffling, but there you go. But yeah, so Down Among the Dead Men is a future war story with a narrator who is... He's got a new sort of team of men to look after. And the way that they sort of recycle soldiers in this is when people are killed, is they use their bodies and they effectively kind of clone them up. So they're resurrected, but they're like the living dead. They're like zombies. And this is an idea that's been done lots of times in SF novels. There's a similar thing in Jack Williamson's Legion of Time, where dead people are taken on board the starship, and what is it called? The Chronion, which is like a time ship, really. And there's the Jack Williamson video, which you will have seen yet, maybe, if I finished it and put it up. If not, it will come up. Chaotic, I know, but you love it, really. And there's things like We All Died at Breakaway Station by Richard Meredith, which was a Venture SF title where, you know, they're effectively zombies. It's quite a common thing. So these sort of heroes which have been killed in this interstellar war, their flesh is reused and harvested and resurrected. And the narrator of this is put in charge of them. And everybody on Earth is desperately sort of breeding. They're trying to have more and more children because the aliens are super profuse, and that's the only way they're going to beat them. It's a war of numbers, and I was really impressed by it. And it's a story with real heart, and it's about the way that people treat each other and companionship between men, comradeship, and in that way it reminded me a little bit of Wonder Count Cadence by James Crumley, one of my favourite military novels. That's probably stretching it a bit far. It's more like the Forever War, but if you've not read the Crumley book, you really should, and I will talk about that on the channel at some point. And there'll be some more nests for later in this video. While we're on this subject, I'll talk a little bit more about it. I'm about 2/3 of the way through, and it begins with a wonderful Richard Matheson story called The Test, which I really thought was great. You know, Matheson's got such humanity, and he really knows how to describe people having a bad time and stressed and alone. And it's set in a future where there's overpopulation, and as people get older, every 5 years they have to sit a test to see whether they're still worthy of being alive. And it's about an old man who lives with his son and his son's wife, and he's about to have the test, and his son is coaching him the night before. And it's difficult because the son and the wife are thinking, can we cope with another 5 years of this chap bumbling around and what have you, and being old and in the way? And I know that feeling, and being old in the way myself. And at the same time, there's the guilt around that. And there's the concern that they just think their father will be sort of taken away and given a lethal injection if he fails the test. And of course, you know, he's getting on in years, and he's struggling with his cognition and things. But it's a wonderful, humane story, and terrifying as well at the same time. And it's very much the real world sort of SF thing. And Matheson, again, the writing is so strong, is so clear. His understanding of emotions, the way he conveys things, wonderful, wonderful stuff. One of the great writers. There would be no Stephen King, no Dan Simmons, no contemporary American horror without Matheson. And great contribution to SF as well. I Am Legend, of course, The Shrinking Man, fantastic. There's a Damon Knight story in here called Anachron, which is a time travel story, which, I'll be honest, I don't think I really understood it. And I blow hot and cold with Knight. Sometimes I love him, other times I think, you know, what have you. There's Black Charlie by Gordon R. Dixon, which I've read before, mentioned before. There was a Donald A. Wollheim story, which I really didn't do a lot for me, I have to say. Fondly Fahrenheit by Alfred Bester, which I've read many times, which I think I said when I first covered this, I think is an overrated story. The Cold Equations, Tom Godwin. And a Chad Oliver story called Transformer, which in the preamble, Asimov said, I really didn't want to put this story in because it's more like a fantasy story, and it's an interesting one. And it's the first person narrative of a figurine who lives on a model railway layout, a little plastic model of a woman, and she's narrating what it's like to be on this layout, which this boy has, and he's just become an adolescent. And she talks about the other figures there and the life they have when the transformer is switched on and the electricity comes through and he runs the trains around the track. And it's absolutely bizarre. It's a good story, actually. It really is. But it is more like a fantasy story than an SF story. But that's called Transformer. So if you ever get a chance to read it, do it. It is really original, it has to be said. Really original story, and that's a thing in itself. And at the moment, I'm reading The Music Master of Babylon by Edgar Pangborn, which is beautifully written, post-apocalyptic story set in New York. Water levels have risen, and there's one man left living in an old museum. Absolutely stunning prose. And recently I reread Davy. Davy is really well written, fantastic smooth prose and very quirky, but this is really quite something, and it's made me think I want to read some more Pangborn and read some things I haven't read. Really fantastic story. And there's some other great stuff in here to come up. There's Philip K. Dick's The Father Thing, which I haven't read for years, which I must go back to. There's the original short version of The Deep Range, interesting. There's a Horace L. Gold story. Gold was the editor of Galaxy, of course. An Anthony Boucher story. He was the editor of the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. And a Frederick Brown story. So that's something I'm enjoying at the moment. To complete this instalment of Collector Diary, we'll have a look at Joanna Russ, and I've just received this, the first Joanna Russ collection in Lower Library of America, which I got from Amazon, and astonishingly it's arrived without being battered to hell. It was in a tiny box with no packaging. It could have rattled around, and I guess that's just contingency and luck, really. So it is here beside some of my old Russes, The Female Man in Women's Press SF, which is probably my favourite, though I do want to reread some. I want to reread the Alex stories, and this is the Women's Press edition of The Adventures of Alex, which contains Picnic on Paradise, which you'll have seen the Old Star edition which preceded that. I still have a copy of that. I'd like a copy of that again, with a very kind of exploitive, sexist Chris Achilleos cover, I believe, but I nonetheless love it. And as you see, We Who Are About To, which is just there, is in this collection. And a lot of us are wondering online whether there'll be another Russ collection, because there is more material. For example, And Chaos Died is not in there. So I feel Lower could probably get another Russ collection together. My only problem with these, and we'll look at the actual book itself, is that the thing with Lower is that, once things get into the canon, they have to be sort of politically correct. So you've got Lagan, Octavia Butler, Joanna Russ, and they're very, very much with the narrative of identity politics now. Of course, Philip K. Dick and Kurt Vonnegut, Ray Bradbury in there. I wish they'd sort of step outside the box a bit and choose somebody who is brilliant but neglected, like Thomas M. Dish, for example. Obviously, there are rights issues, but you do wonder, because these things are being licensed to Lower, so they could make more of an effort to be a little bit more groundbreaking in terms of pushing things forward into the canon instead of waiting until the public mood is with those works. So let's take a look at the book itself, and it's got a matte jacket, and I do like the look of these. They are really, really nice, but my problem with them is usually, as I think I said before, is the paper quality. The binding is always really, really nice. It's full cloth, and there's a bit of gilt embossing there, and you can't really argue with that. And they are beautiful things. They have a silk ribbon marker, if I can feel that out, but the paper is rather thin, and it doesn't make for comfortable reading. This is the thing. I do like comfortable reading. I prefer sort of, if the paper's creamy, but it's very like Bible paper, and it really needs to be a lot thicker. It's way too thin. So it's edited by Nicole Ruddick. I wonder if she's any relation to Nicholas Ruddick. I don't think so. I think the name is different. And yeah, there's some great stuff in here. The complete Alex stories. I'm looking at a glance. I think there's something in that which is not in my Women's Press edition, which I think is the Game of Let. Let me just check the contents. Yeah, there's actually, it is more complete. What else is missing? Yeah, Second Inquisition is there. Yeah, the Game of Let is there, which is good. So it is complete, whereas this edition is not. So there we go. On Strike Against God, I haven't read, and The Female Man, I haven't read for a long time, but it is really good. And then there's a couple of important stories there. So hopefully we will see another one of those coming up. And they are lovely, these, but I always feel the need to bag them. So I think that's it for this Collector Diary. It's a shorter one than usual. There are some more nests for things coming, but they're going to take a few weeks. So I think we'll cover those in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed that. Bye for now.